And that follows the 9 o'clock news, now on BBC One, with Michael Burke.
Hundreds of thousands of people are spending a second night in the ruins of Kobe. The Japanese earthquake looks to have killed around 4,000 people. MPs are close to a crucial Commons vote on opening up our fishing grounds to the Spaniards. And stepping on the gas, the industry's watchdog says the public's losing faith in British gas. Good evening. The final death toll in the Japanese earthquake is likely to be around 4,000 people. By tonight, more than 3,000 bodies had been found. Nearly 900 more are missing, and rescue workers say they are now unlikely to be found alive. All day, the roads out of Kobe have been jammed by hundreds of thousands of people fleeing from what's left of their homes. Tonight, BBC correspondents Fergal Keane and Mike Smart report from the ruins of Kobe. And from Tokyo, Humphrey Hawksley assesses how much the earthquake has cost Japan and shaken the country's confidence in being able to cope with disaster.
Kobe has ceased to be a city of the modern world. The fires have created a wasteland. Men, women and children, the ordinary people of this poorer quarter, died amid the flames and rubble. Those who survived drift through the aftermath. They have become refugees in their own city. Throughout the day they searched the ruins, but nothing survived the inferno which gutted thousands of buildings. The search for missing loved ones abandoned, some simply gathered what they could and left. This young couple lost their business and they're angry. The authorities have given us no help, no advice. They haven't told us what to do, she said. You meet the survivors everywhere, clinging to what little they have left. In the cold of winter, the old seem especially vulnerable. As people sift through the ruins for what might remain of their property, there's a profound sense of shock here. It goes beyond the loss of life and the destruction of property, affecting people's sense of security, their peace of mind. For in a very real way, their world has been torn apart. Many of Kobe's citizens have had no option but to camp out in the open. This in the heart of the Japanese winter, where temperatures regularly drop below freezing point. The supplies of that most vital commodity, water, are scarce. With many pumping stations destroyed, rationing has been introduced, forcing the refugees into patient queues. In the supermarkets, people are buying up what they can. Food is running short in Kobe. The instinct is to hoard in case of a total breakdown in supply. For one old man, it is nothing less than a fight to survive.
I can't even imagine rebuilding my home. All I can think about is trying to feed my grandchildren. They've only had one bowl of rice since the quake.
Those who once lived in Kobe's suburbs are now having to cook in the city streets. Yet for all the undoubted anger, the mood for most is one of silent despair. Throughout the day, the emergency services struggled to cope, racing from one scene of disaster to another. The overstretched ambulance service found many roads were blocked. Some of its members became casualties themselves. Criticism of the relief effort has been constant, coming from locals and expatriates.
We didn't see any emergency services at all. No professional people trying to get people out. It was all families just helping everybody else.
Although they say the size of the disaster could not have been predicted, senior officials do admit the rescue effort has been badly handled. Japan has had more experience of earthquakes than any other country in the world. The government is now facing intense pressure to explain just why the city of Kobe was so poorly prepared. One fault in the city's architecture has become blatantly clear. Far too many older buildings lacked earthquake proofing. They collapsed into one another when the quake began. By contrast to the older buildings, those of more recent construction survived virtually intact. The search for bodies has now been abandoned, with it any hope that the hundreds who are still missing might be alive. For a country that has experienced the horrors of atomic war, this disaster with its storms of fire has a dark resonance. With the rescue services struggling and the threat of an aftershock still a potent one, the nightmare is far from over. Fergal Keane, BBC News, Kobe.
Dawn is approaching in Kobe now, and more than 150,000 homeless survivors have been spending the night sleeping in emergency centres across the city. Others, afraid to return to their homes, are camping out in freezing temperatures.
As darkness fell, the search for anyone still trapped in the rubble in central Kobe was much less evident than it had been during the day. Destroyed buildings took on an eerie quality for a second night. The fire brigade stood by for any new emergency. About 200 fires caused by the earthquake are still alight, though most now appear to be smouldering and all are said to be under control. The authorities are switching their attention to those made homeless. There's insufficient food and fresh water to go round. A delivery of bottled water was snapped up by a long queue of people, but it wasn't free, costing £1.50 a litre. The homeless that aren't clogging the roads trying to leave Kobe are sheltering in schools, colleges and some hotels. Many of them buildings still without light and heat, though the Japanese tend to live with the minimum of central heating, even at the best of times. There are queues for free telephone lines of people anxious to trace relatives. Many are still trying to contact members of their family, unaccounted for since the earthquake. One woman hadn't seen her children since they told her they were going out to watch the fires. Children primarily remain in a state of shock from the 30 seconds which shook their world to pieces. Some families who've lost almost everything live in their cars and vans. A few with plentiful supplies of food, others with very little. And cardboard boxes are makeshift homes for many. Rehousing the tens of thousands of people who've been made homeless by this earthquake is going to be a long and difficult job for the authorities. In the meantime, many of the families will remain out in the open because they say it's safer. Rumours persist of official warnings of aftershocks of similar size to the original earthquake, and those remaining outside are taking no risks of being caught inside vulnerable buildings if they occur. Mike Smart, BBC News, Kobe, Japan.
The Japanese government is being criticised for the way the emergency services are coping with the earthquake. They didn't think it would strike in Kobe. Now there are worries about the vulnerability of other cities. Kobe and Osaka are at the heart of the country's second biggest urban area. The earthquake smashed roads and rail links that form the spine of the transport system linking much of industrial Japan. Until yesterday, the biggest share of Japan's foreign trade passed through the port facilities on Osaka Bay. The closure of industries making chemicals and steel, computers and cars will disrupt production in factories far beyond the earthquake zone.
Japan's civil defense officials arrived for a briefing they never expected to hear. The extensive precautions against earthquakes hadn't worked when everybody thought they would. Television broadcasts throughout the day brought home the extent of the tragedy. The names of the known dead were read out continuously. Officials admitted they'd got it wrong.
This time the quake was very shallow and the damage enormous. We had a lot of difficulty even rounding up the rescue teams. Gathering information's also been hard, so our training didn't work.
Already there are economic repercussions. Toyota is closing factories because there are no supplies from the devastated area. Osaka's port is paralyzed, and other factories, chemicals, steel, glass, paper, cement, have all stopped production as the country's industrial heartland recovers. Now questions are being asked about whether Tokyo itself is protected. The population here is 13 million, many more in the surrounding urban area. Old buildings are mixed with new. Elevated motorways are meant to be earthquake-proof, but that was proved wrong in Kobe. Estimates are that if an earthquake hit here, 10,000 people could die. This global financial center looked on the bright side today. Construction shares went up in anticipation of a building boom. But it knows that if Tokyo's hit, the international repercussions could be catastrophic. The whole of urban Japan knows it's at risk, that too much faith has been put into technology, and that the city structures are fragile. pressure is mounting on the government to account for the flaws in the system and correct them before the next, possibly even more devastating earthquake hits. Humphrey Hawksley, BBC News, Tokyo.
The Foreign Office here has compiled a list of Britons in the earthquake area who are now known to be safe. Information will be available on a special number 071 839 5656. The line will be open from 9 till 5 tomorrow.